I never imagined that the gift I received for my 68th birthday would almost cost me my life and reveal the deepest betrayal a mother can face. The bottle of bourbon my daughter sent me, after 3 years of silence, contained a deadly poison meticulously planned to stop my heart. But fate had other plans when I decided to re-gift that bottle to my son-in-law, never knowing it would unleash a silent persecution that would transform our small town into a battlefield. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories travel. The box arrived one October morning, wrapped in brown craft paper with only 2 words written on the card: "Happy birthday." No signature, no return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Rachel, the daughter I raised for 20 years and hadn't seen in 3. I placed the box on the kitchen table, where the morning light filtered through the blinds, casting golden stripes that danced across the room. Opening the package, I found a limited edition bottle of bourbon, the kind so beautiful you'd keep it as a decoration. The amber liquid caught the light as if it held fire inside. The dark green label with gold lettering indicated the kind of design that costs more than the contents itself. I ran my thumb over the wax seal on the cork, feeling its texture against the ridges of my skin. There was a time when whiskey was my favorite companion at the end of the day, not in a careless way, but slow and deliberate. A single glass after a day of fixing fences or cleaning gutters. When my partner Linda was still alive, she would pour us a glass after dinner. On Sundays, we'd sit on the porch and let the sound of crickets fill the silence. That was before a heart attack took that option away from me. 3 years without a drop, and Rachel knew it. She was there at the hospital when the doctor explained everything, the long list of things I could no longer consume if I wanted to see 70. She didn't say much then, just stared at her phone, scrolling with her thumbs. I convinced myself she was just trying to distract herself. Now, I'm not so sure. We didn't have one of those movie-style fights where someone storms out slamming the door. It was subtler. She simply stopped coming to Sunday dinners. Then she missed Thanksgiving. By the second Christmas without her, I realized we weren't speaking at all. Silence has a way of becoming a habit. Seeing her handwriting again after so long tightened my chest. It wasn't joy or even relief, just a weight I couldn't name. The plain white card with just "Happy Birthday" in blue ink, no mom, no signature. Just those 2 lonely words, as if she were afraid to say more. I decided not to open the bottle. I didn't even consider it. I slid it across the table and went back to my coffee, which had already gone cold. The clock above the stove ticked constantly, making the house feel even emptier. I thought of Rob, my son-in-law. Rob is one of those men who never shows up empty-handed or without tools in the bed of his truck. 2 summers ago, after a storm took half the shingles off my roof, he was already on a ladder by 8 a.m., hammer in hand, before I'd even had my first sip of coffee. He's the kind of person who doesn't wait for an invitation to help. If anyone deserved something nice, it was him. Since I couldn't drink the bourbon, the idea of it gathering dust on my shelf felt wrong. Rob would crack it open, share it with friends, have a story to tell. That seemed better than watching it fade behind glass. That afternoon, the bottle was buckled into the passenger seat of my old Chevy Silverado. I don't know why I did it, maybe habit, but the idea of it tipping over during the drive bothered me. The sun was dipping west, painting everything in that amber light we only get in late October. The fields along the highway were starting to turn brown, the soybeans cut close to the ground. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke from some distant bonfire. Rob's house sits on a rise on the outskirts of town, a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch that looks like something out of a postcard. I parked the truck, gravel crunching under the tires, and cut the engine. He opened the door before I could knock, wearing a red flannel shirt and faded jeans, sawdust still clinging to his work boots. "Martha, what's this?" he asked, looking directly at the bottle in my hands. "From Rachel," I answered, holding it out to him. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Rachel sent you this?" "Yeah, I thought you'd appreciate it more than I would." He took the bottle carefully, turning it over to read the label. "This is high-end stuff, Martha. It's the kind of bottle you save for a special occasion," I told him, "so make tonight a special occasion." He smiled. "I think I will." "Thanks." It felt good to give it to him. To see it go somewhere it would be appreciated. I drove back to my truck with the sunset reflecting off the dashboard. On the way home, I kept thinking about the bottle, not with nostalgia, but curiosity. Rachel never spent that kind of money without an angle. Most of the time, when she was younger, she'd borrow cash for gas and forget to pay it back. So why now? Why a gift she knew I wouldn't use? The thought kept nagging at the back of my mind as I pulled into the garage. I pushed it away. Not everything needs a motive, I told myself. But I didn't believe it. That night I made a pot roast, and the house filled with the aroma of onions and carrots, the kind of meal best shared, though I ate it alone. The wall clock was nearing 9. I was washing the last plate when the phone rang the landline. Almost nobody calls that number anymore. Hello? Hi, Mom. Rachel's voice was smooth and casual, as if no time had passed. I leaned against the counter, surprised. Rachel. Happy birthday, she said, with a delay too long to sound natural. Did you get my gift? I got it. Well, what did you think? It's a beautiful bottle. Did you try it yet? Her tone shifted just a fraction, sharper at the edges. No. I gave it to Rob. I thought he'd get better use out of it. Silence. No click, no static, just a long, heavy pause. You gave it to Rob? Her voice went cold. That's right. There was a sound like a slow, measured exhale. Oh. Then the line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a moment before hanging up. The clock kept ticking. My stomach churned, not from the pot roast, but from something less tangible. The way she had asked about the whiskey, as if it mattered in a way it shouldn't. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed, but sleep was slow to come. When I finally drifted off, it was light and restless. The next morning, I tried to shake that strange feeling. I poured a cup of fresh coffee and sat down with the paper. But the phone rang again around midday. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Mrs. Rivera? A female voice asked when I picked up. Yes, it's Linda, Rob's wife. I think you should know. Rob is in the hospital. He collapsed this morning. The doctors think it might be some kind of poisoning. The coffee in my hand went cold instantly. Poisoning? He was fine last night. We had a drink with dinner, and this morning he could barely stand. The doctors are running tests. I didn't say anything. My eyes drifted to the counter, to the empty spot where the whiskey had sat less than 24 hours ago. Did he eat anything unusual? She asked. My mouth was dry. No, but... I gave him a bottle yesterday. Bourbon. From Rachel. There was a pause. In the background, I could hear hospital noises, monitors beeping, and a cart squeaking down the hall. I'll tell the doctors, she said finally. If you think of anything else, anything at all, call me. I promised I would and hung up. I stood in the kitchen, the house silent around me. The October light had turned pale and flat. I didn't move for a long time. When I finally did, it was to go to the trash can. Something white caught my eye near the bottom. A small plastic vial, like the kind for vitamins. No label, just a faint powder clinging to the inside. I didn't remember throwing that away. I picked it up. The cap was screwed on tight. I went to the fridge. On the middle shelf was a glass jar with about half a cup of bourbon, the leftovers from when I'd poured a little out for Rob before giving him the bottle to make it look like I'd tried it, or maybe I'd saved a sample? No. I remembered pouring a bit into a jar because the bottle was so full it looked untouched, and I wanted Rob to think I'd had a sip. Wait, I had saved a bit. My hands trembled as I took it out and set it on the counter next to the vial. I remembered Rick, an old friend who served with me 30 years ago and now ran a small veterinary lab on the edge of town. He owed me a favor after I pulled his truck out of a ditch a couple of winters back. I called him. Rick. I need you to test something for me, I said calmly. What is it? Whiskey. And maybe something else. He didn't ask any more questions, just told me to meet him after the lab closed. That evening, I drove over with the glass jar wrapped in a brown paper bag on the seat beside me. Rick met me in the parking lot wearing a lab coat over a hoodie, the faint smell of disinfectant in the air. This is something I'm going to regret, isn't it? He asked. Just tell me what's in it, I replied. He nodded, took the bag, and disappeared inside. I sat in the truck with the engine running, watching the light fade from the sky. The radio was off. My thoughts replayed the last 24 hours, retracing every step, the handwriting, the bottle, Rachel's voice when I told her I gave it to Rob. That long, heavy pause. Rick called the next day, just after noon. Martha, you're not going to like this. There's something in the whiskey. White snake-a-root. White snake-a-root? Yeah. In the right dose, it stops a man's heart. I closed my eyes. The phone felt heavy in my hand. You said Rob drank this? And you didn't? He let out a slow sigh. Then you might have just dodged a bullet. And that is where the first part of this story ends. Not with answers, but with a question that would lead me to places I never thought I'd have to go. Because the moment I hung up, I knew Rachel hadn't just sent me a gift. She had sent me a message. I used to think there was no worse sound than the phone ringing in the middle of the night. Turns out, there is. It's the phone ringing when you already know deep down the news will be terrible. When Rick hung up, the world around me went silent, as if the house were holding its breath. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, the truck keys from the hook by the door, and headed to Mercy General Hospital. The drive into town was through empty stoplights and intersections, one of those autumn mornings where the sun looks bright but offers no warmth. I parked in the farthest corner of the lot and walked quickly, one hand in my pocket, the other pressed against my ribs, as if I could hold in what was churning inside me. All hospitals have the same smell, something sterile mixed with burnt coffee, and the light is always too white. A volunteer directed me to Rob's room. He didn't look like the strong man who climbed onto my roof uninvited. He was washed out, his skin a shade paler than the pillow under his head. The monitors beside the bed hummed and blinked in sync with a stubborn, slow heartbeat. Linda was sitting in a plastic chair, dragged as close to the bed as possible. She had that look I've seen 100 times, someone waiting for something that refuses to hurry. "Martha," she said, standing up. "Thanks for coming. How is he?" "They're trying to stabilize his heart rate." Her hands were clasped at her chest, not in prayer, but as if trying to keep the air from escaping. "They said they found signs of a plant toxin. They're running more tests." I approached the bed. Rob's mouth was slightly open, air moving in and out in a fragile rhythm. His hair, usually neatly combed, had fallen over his forehead in a way that made him look younger and more vulnerable. "Did he eat anything unusual last night?" I asked. "Or drink anything he usually doesn't?" "We both had a drink at dinner." She looked straight at me. "The question was already there. The bottle you brought." "I need you to tell the doctors exactly that," I told her urgently. "Tell them it was new, unopened, and that I can get a sample of the same liquid." She reached out as if to take my hand, then changed her mind and gripped the bed rail. "Martha, what is this, do you think?" "I don't know what to think," I replied, which was only half the truth. "But I'm going to find out." The doctor walked in, a man in his 50s, with a face trained not to show emotion. He explained in quiet tones about heart rhythms, enzymes, and continuous observation. He didn't say what he didn't know, and he didn't know much yet. When he left, I promised Linda I'd call as soon as I had anything that could help. In the truck, I didn't start the engine right away. I sat with the key half-turned, watching my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked like a woman who didn't have anything left to break that hadn't cracked before. "White snake root," I said aloud, tasting the words in the air like a carpenter, checking if a board is warped. They were cruel. They sounded deliberate. At home, the silence greeted me like a neighbor with nothing to say. I went straight to the fridge. The glass jar with the rest of the bourbon was still there, hidden behind the milk. I held it up to the light and watched the liquid curve against the glass as I tilted it. You wouldn't know just by looking at it. You never know. The worst things always come disguised as something harmless. I set the jar by the sink and went to the trash can. I had thrown that small white vial away yesterday. I lifted the lid and realized the bag had been moved, placed back differently, and the vial was gone. I looked at the door. The deadbolt was thrown just as I had left it the night before. The windows were down and locked. I didn't keep spare keys anywhere obvious. Still, someone had been here. You could feel it. How do you know when a room has been rearranged, even if you can't identify what changed? I took a deep breath through my nose and let it out slowly. No panic. Panic is loud and stupid. I needed something quiet and useful. I called Rick again. "It's gone," I said when he answered. "What?" "The small vial I told you about. Someone took it out of my trash." "Are you sure you didn't just—" "I didn't. I know what my own hands have done in my own house." He didn't tell me I might be wrong. Rick understands the cost of ignoring what your gut already knows. "You have to call the police," he said. "I can document what's in the whiskey, but that vial would have been clear proof of tampering." I know, I replied. I will. And Rick? Yeah. Don't let whoever did this think you aren't prepared. I'm not, I stated, and ended the call. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at the table with a notepad. The act of writing calms me. I drew a line down the middle of the page and labeled the left side what I know and the right side what I can prove. Under what I know, I wrote, Rachel sent the bottle. Rachel asked if I tried it. Rachel changed her tone when I told her I gave it to Rob. The whiskey Rick tested has white snake root. The vial is missing. Under what I can prove, I wrote, Rick's test, the sample remaining in the jar, Rachel's call last night. Then I looked at the two columns and wanted to build a bridge between them. Bridges don't appear because you want them to, you have to build them. I pulled my small digital voice recorder from the desk drawer. It's old, a bit scratched on the corners, but functional. I checked the battery half charged. I slid it into the inside pocket of my coat, right where its weight felt like a hand on my chest, reminding me to breathe. It was past noon when I pulled into Rachel's apartment complex. Her place was in a row of nearly identical units. Neutral siding, brass numbers, automatic porch lights. Her car was in the driveway clean, a decade newer than mine. I walked up the path and knocked. She opened the door with a face that shifted rapidly. Surprise, then calculation, then an expression trying to look welcoming. Mom, she said, as if she were expecting me, but also as if she had no idea what I might want. This is unexpected. Is it? I asked, and walked in without waiting for an invitation. The place smelled of lemon and nothing else. She keeps it spotless. Everything always at right angles, nothing out of place. I heard about Rob, she commented, closing the door. Scary. Liara is with him now? The doctors think it might be a virus. That's what they think. I kept my tone neutral. If I pushed, she'd shut down. If I showed softness, she'd use it against me. I walked to the kitchen. On the counter were 3 bottles, 2 bourbons and a rye lined up like soldiers. None of them were the brand I had received. None opened. Did you try the bottle you sent me? I asked. She laughed softly. The idea was for you to enjoy it, for your birthday. You know I don't drink anymore. People change, she said, with a careless shrug. I took a step closer to the counter and ran my finger along the rim of an empty glass by the sink, buying time. Rob liked it, I commented. He said his favorite glass was the one from the middle shelf, the single malt. She blinked once, slower than a natural reflex. Yeah, funny thing, I said, feeling the recorder in my pocket beating like a second heart. I never told you where I kept it. For a split second, she went still, like an animal hearing a twig snap in the woods. Then, her mouth curved into a studied smile, and she shook her head with a rehearsed laugh. You must have mentioned it. You get talkative when you're sentimental. I didn't, I stated, holding her gaze until she had to choose between looking away or challenging me. She chose a third option, picking up a dish towel and starting to dry a glass that was already dry. Mom, she said, looking at the glass instead of me. You always overthink. You always find something to fix, even when nobody asked. You sent me a $500 bottle I can't drink, I replied. I'm trying to understand that. She set the glass on the counter and spread her hands like someone with nothing to hide. So, maybe there's nothing to understand. Maybe give me the benefit of the doubt for once. Her voice could sound reasonable if you hadn't known her for 30 years. My daughter has a way of sounding sincere when she lies. That pause from the phone call hung between us like a third person in the room. I'm going to ask you a question, I said, and I'm going to let the silence after it give me the answer. She looked at me like we were playing chess and I had just announced my next move. Okay, did you tamper with that whiskey? Silence. Silence is a living thing when you use it right. The fridge hummed. The clock on the microwave changed from 12:09 to 12:10. A car drove slowly past outside, tires audible on the asphalt. She didn't look away, but she didn't speak either. Goodbye, Rachel, I said, because sometimes leaving is the only sentence that matters. She said my name as I turned. Mom. In that tone where the word is both a hook and a warning. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. You're going to keep accusing me of things. You're going to push me away, she said. I'm not accusing, I replied, looking at the door. I'm collecting. Outside, the air was sharp and metallic. I sat in the truck and turned off the recorder. The red light blinked and went out. I put it on the seat beside me like a silent witness. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. I didn't drive home. Not yet. I parked in the far corner of a supermarket lot where no one would bother me, and I made a call I had been avoiding since Rick mentioned White Snakeroot. Detective Reynolds. A deep voice answered after 2 rings. Detective, my name is Martha Rivera. I think I have information about a poisoning. I have a sample of the substance and a recording that might interest you. He didn't ask for explanations over the phone. Men who know their job don't demand the full truth in the first breath. Can you come in this afternoon? He asked. Yes, I can. He gave me a time and an office number in the back hallway of the precinct. When I hung up, I sat with my hands on the wheel, staring ahead. The automatic doors of the supermarket kept opening and closing, people going in and out, carrying paper bags with groceries that would make their houses smell like dinner. Back at the house, I stopped at the mailbox because sometimes you need to do something ordinary to keep the other things from consuming you completely. Flyers, a bill, a grocery ad, and a postcard from a dealership thinking 0% interest would sway me. Inside, I put the glass jar into a Ziploc bag, sealed it like I knew what I was doing, and tucked it into an old cigar tin where I used to keep nails. The recorder went into the same tin. I put the tin in a paper bag with handles, and for good measure, put that bag inside another. After you find something missing from your trash, extra layers seem like prudence rather than paranoia. I called Linda. She answered quickly, her voice small and tired. Martha, I'm going to the police, I informed her. I have a sample and other evidence. Rob is resting, she said. They put him on a heart monitor. He keeps waking up asking what day it is. I tell him, and he nods like he's trying to decide if he believes me. I'll call you after I talk to the detective, I promised. Tell him I'll stop by later if he wants to see a familiar face. She laughed. A single, breathless sound. He likes it when people ask him to be strong, she said, but he likes your company more. I checked everything, locked every door, checking the windows twice before leaving. The paper bag sat on the passenger seat like a person. I strapped it in with the seatbelt, a habit of comfort when common sense feels far away. On the way to the station, I turned on the radio without really listening. People singing about things that seemed simple, which first irritated me, then tired me, and finally made me feel nothing. The precinct was colder than the hospital somehow, but smelled better. Reynolds met me in a small office with a window facing a brick wall. He was younger than me, but older than a rookie, with sharp eyes and a tie he had adjusted several times that day. He offered me water. I accepted because my mouth was dry and because people notice when you refuse everything they offer. He waited until I took a sip before asking his first question. Tell me about the whiskey. And so I did. I gave him the dates, Rachel's exact words, and the meaning of that pause that didn't sound like surprise. I didn't share my theories, just the facts, letting him organize them as he saw fit. Then I put the paper bag on the table, took out the tin, opened it, and placed the glass jar and recorder on his desk like tools at the start of a job. He didn't touch the items yet. He asked questions that seemed small, but weren't. Who else has keys to your house? When did you check your trash last? Did you mention the vial to anyone besides Rick? Then, he picked up the recorder and weighed it in his hand, as if assessing the weight a word can carry when you need to haul it. You understand, ma'am, he said. This doesn't become a case because you and I have a feeling. This becomes a case when what you handed me can survive official scrutiny. I understand, I replied. I want other people to see it. He nodded. We'll send the liquid to the state lab. We'll make a copy of your audio. If there's cause, we act. If there isn't, we'll tell you exactly why we can't. Are you okay with that? I am, I said, and I meant it. I don't want the wrong culprit punished. I want the right truth revealed. When I stood to leave, he said my name as if testing it. Mrs. Rivera, do not speak to your daughter again until I authorize it. If she contacts you, write down the time and what she says, and keep your answers shorter than her questions. I nodded, surprised by the feeling that someone else was finally willing to carry a corner of the weight I was bearing. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray and opaque, the kind of light that hurts your eyes more than it illuminates the path. I drove to the hospital. Linda was in the same chair, and the same monitors were still singing their electronic silent song. Rob looked more like himself. His skin had regained some color, and his mouth was less tight around the breath going in and out. I put my hand on the bed rail, and his eyes opened. "You look like hell," he whispered. "You should see yourself," I retorted, and he smiled just with the left side of his mouth, the way men do when smiling demands too much from the rest of the face. "Heard you're making friends with the cops," he commented. "Trying to make sure they're on our side when they show up," I replied. He closed his eyes again, nodded once, and drifted off. I stayed there longer than necessary, listening to the machine that kept him honest about his heartbeat. Linda whispered words that belonged only to the two of them. At home, everything was exactly as I had left it. Silence filled the rooms like a guest who refuses to leave. I made an omelet I didn't finish and washed the pan, because some things you do just to prove to yourself you're still the person who does them. I went to the hall closet, took the fireproof box from the top shelf, and opened it on the kitchen table. It held the documents of a life birth certificates, the deed to the house, and Linda's rose gold wedding ring, which I wasn't ready to let go of yet. I added a sticky note to the inside lid: "Whiskey sample with police. Do not discard." I don't know who the note was for, maybe myself. I slept on the couch with the hall light on. I hadn't done that since the night after my heart attack, and my chest didn't enjoy the similarity between those two moments. I woke before dawn because the body remembers old alarms. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I listened to the house breathe. When the sun finally rose, I called Linda and told her I'd stop by around noon. She said the doctor thought Rob would be transferred from the ICU if his vitals stayed stable. At 10 a.m., the phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail because I had learned something important the day before. You don't owe anyone an answer before you're ready to give it. The message arrived after the second ring. I waited, then hit play. "Mom, it's me." Rachel's voice was tight as a wire. "We need to talk. Sooner the better." She paused. "Call me back." I didn't call back. I wrote down the time and the exact words, putting the paper in the fireproof box. Because sometimes you need to create your own evidence. I looked out the window at my backyard, which refuses to turn green no matter how much a woman waters it. The porch chair creaked once. No wind that I could see. The day went silent again. If you want me to admit I felt fear, I won't deny it. Fear isn't something I hide anymore. It belongs to the truth the same way nails belong to wood. It holds it all together. I stood there in the kitchen with my hand on the back of a chair, and I knew this without needing to write it down. Whatever this was, it had passed the point where a mother and daughter could fix it with a quiet chat at the table. It had passed the point where a bottle was just a gift and a hospital was just a place that happens to other people. It was going to get worse before it got better, and I would keep walking toward it. One room, one phone call, one steady breath at a time. There is a kind of silence that doesn't sit still. It paces. It taps the rim of your coffee mug. Look at the phone on the counter and count to 60 with me. Then start again. Detective Reynolds told me not to speak to my daughter, so I didn't return Rachel's call. I wrote down the timestamp of the voicemail like it was a license plate I needed to memorize. In the morning, I followed the detective's instructions exactly, but the house felt watched. I left the phone on the hall table and walked through the rooms with my hands behind my back, not because I expected to find anything, but because women like me don't sit when they can stand, don't rest when there is work to be done. The October light came in weaker today, like a white sheet hung over the sun. I checked the back door, the window locks, the side entry to the garage with the stubborn lock you have to lift while turning. All in order, all normal. Normal is not the same as safe. I made a second cup of coffee, didn't drink it, and opened the fireproof box on the kitchen table. Inside, the deed, insurance forms, Linda's ring, the index card where I copied the exact words of Rachel's message. I added another card. Detective Reynolds, 2:30 p.m., underlined twice. All morning I held back from calling the station, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to show up with a day's worth of resolve stored up in me. Before leaving, I took another slow lap around the house. In the front hallway, I stopped. The deadbolt aligned with the metal striker plate, just a fraction of a millimeter off a new scratch on the metal rim, round and clear, like a poorly cut key would make after a couple of tries. Nothing broken, nothing forced, just a mark you only notice if you know the door like you know the bones of your own hand. A thought lodged in my chest and wouldn't move. Someone had entered. I went to the utility drawer and found a small piece of thread and some clear Scotch tape. I placed the thread across the bottom of the doorframe and taped it. A trick I learned from a military man tired of finding his locker rummaged through. You don't catch an intruder. You create a story about whether they were there. When I got into the truck, the house looked empty and harmless, exactly as a house should look. Still, I backed out like I was leaving a sleeping animal behind. The station was 3 turns and a long straightaway from the hospital. I carried the weight of Rob's illness in my bones as I walked down the corridor to Reynolds' office. He occupied a modest room, small window, large desk, stacks of files that seemed to grow in the dark. He stood to shake my hand and pointed to a chair. He didn't look like a man who slept too little, nor a man who slept too much. He looked like a man who knew what to do with hard facts. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Rivera," Reynolds said, "and for the samples yesterday. We sent them to the state lab. The preliminary results from your friend Rick match what we saw. We are taking this seriously." "I suppose seriousness has levels," I commented. He almost smiled. "It does. For the moment, it means we are looking for corroboration, hospital reports, your audio, the chain of custody of the sample." He slid a legal pad toward me. "I want your timeline in your own words. When did you receive the package? When did you give it to Mr. Fuentes? When did your daughter call you? When did you discover the vial was missing?" I recounted everything directly, watching his pen move. He didn't interrupt, except to confirm a time or a date. When I finished, he tapped the pad with the side of his pen and leaned back. "You said the trash bag had been moved. Any sign of forced entry? Anyone else with keys?" "No spare hidden. No one I gave one to recently. My late partner had hers. My daughter had one when she was younger." "When was the last time you saw her with that key?" The answer wanted to be a lifetime ago, but the truth came dressed in a hospital gown. 5 years ago, after the heart attack. When Rachel came to get some things for me before I was discharged. She brought slippers, sweatpants, and my phone charger. At the time, I thanked her for the kindness of remembering the charger. I didn't ask for the keys back. I assumed she left them on the kitchen counter. "After my heart attack," I said slowly, "she had them. Then, I don't remember her giving them back." Reynolds nodded, neither surprised nor satisfied. "If someone entered without force, that helps explain the missing vial. Anyone else know about it?" "Only Rick. I'll ask him to document the conversation you had, just to show we aren't creating evidence after the fact." He closed the pad. "Mrs. Rivera, I will tell you clearly, do not meet with your daughter. If she invites you anywhere, let me know. If she shows up, call 911. I mean it." I thought of Rachel's voice on my voicemail, tight as a cable, under the hood of a car you shouldn't touch while the engine is hot. "I will do exactly what you say." He slid a card across the table. "My cell phone. If you feel something is wrong, call. I prefer to be wrong twice than right too late." "I appreciate it," I said, standing up. Leaving the building, it smelled of copier, toner, and floor wax. I went down 2 flights of stairs and stopped on the landing to breathe. I wasn't winded. I was verifying if the ground beneath me was still the same ground I had stepped on when I entered. Linda called when I was parking at the hospital. I answered immediately. "Martha, he's better," she said with tears in her voice. "They're transferring him out of ICU to a transitional unit. He keeps apologizing every time he wakes up, like he thinks he ruined someone's party." "It'll be a party when he's home," I replied. "Can I stop by?" "Please." Rob looked faded but solid, now sitting up, eyes clearer. He extended his forearm when I entered, that old worker's handshake where you grab each other by the wrist. "You've got a hell of a face today," he said, which made Linda laugh through the tissue she held to her chin. "Brought my worst look for a visit," I replied, dragging up the chair. "I'll bring the best one tomorrow." Linda excused herself to talk to a nurse. When the curtain closed, Rob lowered his voice. "Martha." Between us, he looked at the door, then back. "Do you think Rachel did this?" "I think that bottle wasn't a gift." He watched my face as if learning a language through it. "You gonna be okay handling this?" "I'm going to follow the law," I answered. "I'm going to be firm." That wasn't my question. I let the question float long enough to show I had heard it. "I'm going to be okay handling this." He squeezed my forearm once, then let go. Women like us don't hug unless we're burying someone. The squeeze is permission to feel without formalities. The curtain opened, and Linda returned with a younger woman beside her 30s, hair in a practical ponytail, eyes tired but alert. I recognized her from photos on the mantelpiece at Rachel's house. Liara, my daughter-in-law, Rachel's wife, with whom I'd only spoken twice since the wedding politely, like distant neighbors. "Martha," she said. "I'm glad you're here." I stood up. "How are you holding up?" She looked at Rob, scared, angry, mostly scared. Her voice dropped. "We need to talk." Linda patted Rob's hand and said, "I'll give you 2 minutes." And she stepped out into the hall. A woman who understands when a conversation needs privacy, even if she isn't the one who asked for it. Liara motioned me to the small family waiting room around the corner. There was a coffee machine that made everything taste like plastic, and 2 chairs with backs too straight to be comfortable. She didn't sit. Neither did I. "I don't know what you know," she began, "but I know Rachel has been different for a long time. Distant, secretive. She keeps jars on a shelf in the garage, dried plants. She says it's for a hobby. She got into online groups about herbal extraction." She swallowed hard. I didn't think it would connect to something like this. "White snaker root," I said. "Have you heard that name?" Her eyes showed recognition, or fear, or both. "Yes. I saw it in her search history. I thought she was just reading. Studying. Detective Reynolds will want to talk to you if you're willing." She nodded quickly. "I already called him. Left a message." "Good," I said. Relief and grief are cousins. I felt one visiting on behalf of the other. "Liara, if you have anything, screenshots, messages, photos of those jars, save them. Let the detective follow that line." She looked at me intensely enough to really see me. "Why would she do this to you?" I could have said many things. Money I didn't give her, love I didn't show the way she wanted, disappointments that created resentments. Instead, I told the truth as I knew it, because if you can't control the narrative, she'd prefer to burn the page. She shivered as if the words were a cold draft. "She asked me this morning if I had heard from you. She said she wanted to know if you liked the bottle." "What did you answer?" "That you had given it to Rob." We stood in silence for a few seconds with that sentence between us, the kind of thing that changes shape as you watch it. "Thank you," I said, "for telling me." "I'm sorry," she replied, and I knew she meant everything, not just the part she verbalized. We went back to Rob's room and talked about lighter matters: the weather, football, the soup from the cafeteria they tried to call chicken noodle. I left when the nurse came to check the monitors, promising to bring magazines, pretending that mattered for the outcome. On the way home, I stopped at the hardware store. I bought 2 new deadbolts and a pack of those little stick-on alarms that chime when a door opens. The clerk commented that winter was coming early. I replied something about needing to prepare for it. He bagged the locks and wished me a good day. We say those things to each other. Have a good day, as if the day is going to listen. At home, the thread I had taped to the door was exactly where I left it, intact. I stepped over it and locked the door behind me with a soft click. I had thought about calling a locksmith, but installing the locks myself felt like making my own bed in a strange hotel room. If I did it, maybe I could rest my head without all that mental noise. I installed the first lock on the back door, then the second on the front, screwing the plates in slowly and firmly, the muscles in my forearms familiar with the angle and pressure. The little alarms went on the frames with a sound like a Band-Aid being removed. I activated them and opened the door to hear the shrill chime, confirming they would work, and they did loud and clear. When I finished, the sun had dropped enough to cast long shadows across the floor. I heated a can of soup and ate it standing up, holding the bowl in my left hand and the spoon in my right. Old habits. Fewer dishes to wash that way. The phone vibrated on the hall table. I didn't jump. I walked to it at the speed of a woman answering a door without rushing. Unknown number again. I let it vibrate. It stopped. Seconds later, a text appeared. "Rachel, we need to talk face to face. Today." A second message followed before I could process the first. "Rachel, don't make it worse than it already is." I put the phone on the table as if it might burn me. I wrote down the time and the messages exactly as they arrived on a piece of paper and added it to the fireproof box. Then I took Detective Reynolds' card from my wallet and dialed. He answered quickly. "Reynolds." "It's Rivera," I said. "She's asking to meet." "No," he replied, the word as decisive as a gate slamming. "Forward me the texts. I'll log them. If she calls, let it go to voicemail. Did she leave a message before?" I transcribed it. "Good. Keep doing that. I hesitated. Detective, could you stop by and examine my front door? I think someone used a key that wasn't mine. I can send an officer to photograph and document it. I'll stop by personally if I'm free in the next hour. He arrived 40 minutes later with a young officer named Pimentel. They photographed the striker plate, the small scratch where the key had scraped, the thread taped at the bottom like a makeshift trap. Reynolds showed no surprise. He didn't look like a man who liked being right, but he didn't waste energy pretending surprise when he wasn't. "Do you have the original set of keys?" he asked. I went to the hall closet and pulled out the small tin where we kept extras 20 years ago. Inside, 2 brass keys marked front and back in Linda's neat handwriting, a spare key, and a key that shouldn't be there, an unmarked copy cut slightly off-center, causing a mismatch in the tin. My stomach went cold. "This isn't ours," I stated. "We never labeled things like this. We labeled everything." Reynolds asked Pimentel to bag it as evidence. "We'll see if we can get prints. No promises. Keys aren't great for prints." "Do what you can," I asked. "I'd like every little element in this story to stop pretending it isn't connected to the rest." When they left, the house felt different. Neither safer nor less watched, just testified to. There is something that happens when the official world enters your private space. The floor tilts and then straightens at a new angle. I sat at the kitchen table and held my coffee cup with both hands, even though it was empty. The porch chair creaked. No visible wind. I waited for footsteps that didn't come. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb and flipped it face down. When I was a child, I thought being an adult meant no one could tell me what to do. Now it means I've learned who to listen to. Around 9, a car idled outside long enough for me to get up and go to the window. Headlights swept the porch, then vanished. I stayed at the window until I heard the engine fade. Could be nothing. A lost teenager, a delivery driver checking an address. It felt like something wanting to see if I would flinch. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with the hall light on and my boots by the door. I am too old for heroism. I am not too old to be ready. Just before dawn, the phone vibrated again. Voicemail without a ring. I had forgotten about Do Not Disturb. I played the message with the volume low. "Mom, you're making things complicated." Rachel's voice said, more contained than before, as if she were in a place where she didn't want to be heard. "You went to the police. That's not smart. We could have worked this out. You're not thinking straight." She hung up. I wrote it all down. We could have worked this out. Revealing words. Work out what? At 8 sharp, Reynolds called. "State lab came back with preliminary results," he reported. "Independent confirmation of white snake root in your sample. It's enough to formally open a case and request medical records from the hospital for Mr. Fuentes. We are moving." I released a breath that had inhabited me since Rick first mentioned snake root. "Tell me what you need. Keep doing what you're doing. Document. Do not engage. Lock your doors. I will be in touch for a formal recorded statement. If your daughter reaches out, save everything. If she shows up, call 911. I mean it." "I know you do," I replied. "Detective? Thank you." He didn't say, "You're welcome." He said, "We'll do our job." Coming from a man like him, it was the same thing. I showered, dressed, and put on a clean shirt. There is a way a woman needs to look when the day is going to demand firmness. I made breakfast and ate it at the table as if every bite were a wise choice. I drove to the hospital with a stack of magazines under my arm about homes, home renovation, a fancy one about gardens that would never grow in the dry soil of our region. Rob was alert enough to fake interest in an article about chainsaw safety. We both knew he was Humorimdimi. The pretense was a kindness. Liara came in during an article about deck maintenance. She had her phone in hand and looked like someone who hadn't slept in a bed, only near one. "Detective Reynolds called me," she said. "He wants me to bring him Rachel's old laptop. I still have it from before we got married." "Take it to him," I advised. "Let the law carry what it was made to carry." She nodded. "Martha." She texted me. She continued, eyes downcast. "She asked if you were playing the hero. She said, if anything happens, it's your fault." She looked up. I forwarded it to Reynolds. "Good," I said. A heat rose in my chest. Not the old kind. It was the kind that distinguishes between a threat and a warning. Don't answer anything she sends. Not a word. Not even to say you won't answer. When I left, the outside light had the raw honesty of high noon. I drove home the long way, not out of fear, but because I wanted to put more distance between myself and what would come next. The thread on the door was still intact. I stepped over it like a border I could respect and locked the door behind me. I sat with a pen and a yellow legal pad and wrote, "What does she want?" in big letters across the page. Below, I made 2 columns again, money and control. Under money, I wrote, "Last winter, $20,000 loan refused." Under control, I wrote, "Location of bottle, missing vial, calls, we need to talk." The control side weighed heavier on the scale. Money is a reason. Control is a habit. Habits last longer. Around noon, the door alarm let out its sharp shriek. I was out of the chair with the phone in my hand before my brain could tell my body I had overreacted. The alarm chimed again, doing its job. I approached the window out of sight and moved the curtain a finger's width. A delivery van. The driver had opened the screen door to leave a padded envelope on the mat. He looked at the alarm, shrugged like a man who has encountered worse noises, and backed away. The door clicked shut, the alarm silenced. I let my heart return to its place and waited. When the vehicle pulled away, I opened the door. The envelope had no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No note, just a printed photograph. My porch the night before, photographed from across the street. The porch chair motionless, the light above the door shining. No one in the frame. The photo had been taken in the last 12 hours. I looked at the street, at the neighbors' fences, at the spot near the corner where a car could sit with lights off and watch without being seen. Then I took the photograph to the fireproof box, added it to the pile, and called Reynolds. He answered immediately. I described what had arrived, how it arrived, what it showed. "Don't throw it away," he instructed. "I'll send someone." "You're going to get tired of hearing from me," I commented. "I prefer that to the alternative," he replied. He hung up quickly, turning our conversation into a task to be completed. I stood at the window, watching the street sideways, like someone watching a wild animal they don't want to startle. The porch chair moved once. No wind. Houses are like that. What seems static is always communicating something, if you are willing to see it. By late afternoon, the police had taken the photograph and recorded my statement on how it arrived. They took the envelope too. Reynolds sent me a text. "We are requesting security camera footage from your block." Night arrived like a door closing slowly. I heated the soup from the night before and ate it sitting on the back steps, the October air cutting clean in my lungs. The backyard went dark. The chair remained motionless, and somewhere distant, a dog barked at something only dogs can perceive. I went inside and turned on the hall light. The phone vibrated once more. "Rachel, do you think they're going to protect you from what you started? Call me." I didn't call her. I copied it word for word and slid the paper into the box. The box closed with that soft, final sound it always makes. I put it back on the highest shelf, like a woman putting a weight where she can't trip over it in the dark. I stood still, listening to the house talk to itself. The snap and sigh of wood, the thin whine of the fridge motor, the tick-tock of a clock that doesn't understand the meaning of time. I thought of the first time Rachel said "Mom" in a way that made my heart want to stand up and salute, and the last time she said "Mom" in a way that made it want to shrink. It was already completely dark. When I finally lay down on the sofa, I put my hand over my chest and felt my heart working slow, steady, efficient. A long time ago, a doctor told me I would know if I were in danger. That night, that seemed the most honest thing I owned. I don't know if sleep came or if the night simply decided to have mercy, but when the phone rang at 6:12 a.m., I was ready. I answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Rivera." "Reynolds," he said without greetings. "State lab confirmed. We are requesting a warrant." I closed my eyes and visualized the porch chair, the white thread across the threshold, the photograph of my own house taken from across the street. I saw a bottle capturing the morning light as if it were shame in a glass. "Where do you need me?" I asked. "Exactly where you are," he replied. "And whatever happens, do not open the door unless the person on the other side can prove they are here to help." The line went silent. The house listened, and I remained in the small country I had built within my walls, waiting for the day to cross the threshold. They say the hit you don't expect is the one you remember. But this time, I was expecting it. I had been expecting it since the moment Reynolds told me the lab had confirmed the poison. Still, when the knock came loud and decided, my chest tightened, not from fear, but from knowing that the line we were following in the dark was about to be painted with bright, official ink. That knock meant the warrant had teeth now, and the day wouldn't wait for me to feel ready. It was a little past 8 a.m. The light outside held that pale gold that barely touches the ground before fading. I opened the door to find Reynolds with 2 uniformed officers, Pimentel from before, and another I didn't know, young enough that his belt looked too big for him. They were dressed for work that wouldn't stay just on paper. "Good morning, Mrs. Rivera," Reynolds said, holding a folded document in a clear plastic sleeve. Judge signed it at 7:43. "We have authorization to search your daughter's residence and seize any items relevant to the case." He didn't need to explain. This was the moment everything could change. "Do you need me there?" I asked. "No," he said. "And that's not a request. It's an instruction. We don't want you in her line of sight today. We'll do the search. If we find what we expect, we proceed accordingly." Proceed accordingly is police language for your life might not look the same by dinner. Pimentel looked toward the inner hall. "Any changes overnight?" "The thread is still intact. No alarms sounded." Reynolds nodded briefly. "Good. Keep them active. I'll arrange for a proper camera system installation before the week is out." They left in a convoy, a black sedan, a squad car rolling down the street like a punctuation mark heading for an unfinished sentence. I stood in the door until they turned the corner. Then I locked the door and watched the thread at the bottom of the frame, still perfectly motionless, as if daring someone to disturb it. The next few hours stretched endlessly. I tried to read. The words sat on the page like strangers at a bus stop. I made coffee. Didn't drink it. Around 11, I took a slow walk to the edge of town, stopping at the small Veterans Memorial Park, where the benches face a fountain that hasn't worked since last summer. The sound of traffic on Main Street was distant enough to let the air settle. I had been here once with Rachel when she was 10. We had brought bread for the ducks. She asked me what all the names on the plaques were for. I told her they were for men and women who had done their duty to the end. She asked if that meant they had finished the mission. I said, yes. She didn't ask what the mission was. Sometimes I think that's the part I should have explained to her. At 1 p.m., I was back home, sitting at the kitchen table with the phone face up. I wasn't expecting her to call. Rachel isn't the type to call when cornered. She's the type to show up unannounced, forcing the conversation on her own terms. That was what worried Reynolds. At 1:17, the phone vibrated. Not a call, but a text from Liara. "Liara, they're here. I'm in the bedroom with the door closed. Can hear them in the garage." I replied, "Stay inside. Don't interfere. You're safe with them there." She didn't write back. I imagined her sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, listening to boots on concrete and the sound of boxes being moved. I knew that sound. It's the sound of someone looking for the truth, not caring if they wake the whole house. At 2:04, Reynolds called. "We found it." I let the words settle. "What did you find?" 3 glass jars labeled with masking tape, WSR, rootstock, and tincture. 2 of them contain dried plant material consistent with white snakeroot. The third contains liquid. We're sending it to the lab for confirmation. We also found handwritten notes on preparation methods, dosage estimates, and... He paused. "And an envelope addressed to you, unsealed. Inside, a small card with your name at the top and the words, 'You'll understand why when it's over' at the bottom. Nothing between them, just a drawing of a tree with its roots circled." The kitchen felt colder. She left me a message in case the bottle worked. "Looks like it," Reynolds said, his voice quiet. "We're logging, cataloging, and photographing everything. Liara is cooperating fully. She gave consent for the search on shared digital devices." "Did you catch her?" I asked. "Not yet. She wasn't home when we arrived. We're putting out an APB." I gripped the phone tighter. "Detective, if she comes here, I've already flagged your address for priority response. Do not engage with her." The line went silent for an instant. Then he added, "We are moving from suspicion to evidence, Mrs. Rivera. This changes everything." "I understand." I hung up and went to the fireproof box. I added a note. 14:4. Reynolds called. Found jars, notes, letter. I read the other cards in the stack, one by one, as if consulting the manual for a machine that cannot be disassembled. Every entry was a piece of proof that the last month hadn't been a fever dream. Around 3:30, I called Linda to update her. Rob was sleeping. She listened without interrupting, the same way she did when I called her from the ER years ago after my heart attack. "Martha," she said when I finished, "this is going to end one of two ways. Either they arrest her or she runs." "She won't run far," I replied. "No, but far enough to make you doubt." At 4:12, the door alarm tripped. I was in the hall in 3 steps, phone in hand. The front door was closed, the thread on the frame intact. The sound had come from the back. I moved slowly, not out of fear, but because you don't rush when you need to see everything. Through the kitchen window, I saw the screen door swing once, twice, then it stood still. No one in sight. I approached and saw a folded piece of paper wedged between the knob and the jamb. I opened the door, silenced the alarm, and took the paper. One sentence in thick black marker: "Stop letting them in or I will." No signature, no envelope, just those words. I took a photo, put the paper in a plastic bag, and called Reynolds. He said an officer would be close in 15 minutes. Pimentel arrived in 10. He photographed the note in my hand, the spot on the door, the hinges, and the backyard beyond. "Did you see anyone?" he asked. "No movement." "Street was quiet," I answered. "Could have been dropped." And she left quickly. He departed with the note, promising to log it immediately. That night, I didn't bother with the couch. I placed a chair in the corner of the living room where I could see both doors, front and back. The house had a faint metallic smell from the new locks. I kept the lights on, not because I wanted to see out, but because I wanted anyone outside to see me. At 9:45, my phone lit up. Unknown number. I let it ring until it fell to voicemail. 1 minute later, I played the message. "Mom, it's me. They're making a mistake. Those things they found aren't what they think. You know me better than that." A pause. "Call me. Please." The voice was calm, measured, almost gentle, the kind of tone you'd use to sell something to someone who doesn't want to buy. I didn't call back. I wrote it down word for word. The morning brought a heavy frost. The grass was white at the tips, and the air tasted like metal. Reynolds sent a text at 8:12. "We got her. Taken without incident. Will update." I stared at the words until they stopped being shapes and became facts. I drove to the station shortly before noon. The waiting room was small, with 2 plastic chairs against a wall and a vending machine humming in the corner. Reynolds came out to meet me. "She isn't talking," he said. "Lawyered up immediately. That's fine. We have enough to hold her." Liara provided substantial digital evidence, emails referencing route preparation and timing, search history for toxicity levels in adults over 60. What happens now? We present charges to the DA. Attempted murder, possession of a controlled toxic substance, tampering with evidence. The process will be fast. I nodded. My hands stayed in my pockets so they wouldn't do anything inappropriate. Reynolds watched me for a moment. "You holding up?" "I'm standing," I replied. "That's enough." When I left the station, the sky had taken on a dull gray hue, the kind that makes you think snow is coming even if the forecast says otherwise. I drove aimlessly, past the old mill, past the closed hardware store, past the diner that still smelled like 20-year-old grease. I ended up at the hospital. Rob was awake, watching a game show with the sound off. Linda was beside him, knitting something green. "They got her," I said quietly. Rob nodded once. "Good." Linda's needles kept moving. "And now?" "Now," I answered. "We wait for the system to do its job." That night I sat on the back steps with a cup of tea, steam rising in the cold air. The backyard was silent, except for the occasional snap of a branch in the wind. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then fell silent. I thought of the note on the door, the jars in the garage, the letter with the tree roots. I thought of the little girl with the bread at the memorial park, asking if the names meant they had finished the mission. Maybe that was my mission, not to finish it, but to make sure it didn't finish me. When I went inside, I checked the thread on the door. Still there. Still telling the truth. Poison is an ugly word. It doesn't just sit in your mouth. It changes the way you breathe. Reynolds didn't say it immediately. He let Rick explain first, perhaps knowing that hearing it from a friend would be less brutal than hearing it from a detective. But there is no soft way to hear that something meant to kill you was already inside a man you respect, and that you were the one who handed it to him. The decision on what to do with Rachel came like a door closing with a definitive click. I called Reynolds. "Tell the DA I'll testify. Full charges." He didn't say, "Good choice," or "You're doing the right thing." He just said, "Understood," and that was enough. 3 days later, the hearing was scheduled. Preliminary motions, evidence lists, witness prep. Cardoso, Rachel's lawyer, filed objections to half of them. But the judge overruled most. When they brought Rachel into the courtroom for the first time, she scanned the room and found me. Her eyes showed no softness. On the contrary, they turned colder, as if I had just gone back onto her list. I held her gaze because maybe I had. They call it a court of law, but to me, it looked like a minefield. Every word, every look could explode in your face. I walked in thinking the truth would stand on its own. Then I saw how Rachel's lawyer smiled at me, as if she already knew where I would step and how hard I would fall. On the day of the evidentiary hearing, the benches were half full, but the air felt heavier than a crowded church in August. I sat behind Reynolds and the prosecutor, hands clasped in my lap, pretending they weren't sweating. Rachel entered in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed. She didn't look at me initially, then she glanced briefly, just enough for the corners of her mouth to twitch, not in a smile, but in something colder. I remembered why I was there. Rob's hospital bed, the lab report, that damn notebook. The judge called us to order. Reynolds took the stand. He was professional and direct, walking the court through how the bottle was received, tested, and confirmed poisoned. Cardoso objected twice, claiming chain of custody issues, but the judge overruled both. Then it was my turn. The bailiff swore me in. I sat with the microphone close enough to hear my own breathing. The prosecutor started with simple questions: my name, age, where I lived, and my relationship to the defendant. "Yes, Rachel is my daughter," I answered. "And it sounded strange," said aloud, as if it belonged to someone else's life. The prosecutor walked me through the day of the gift. I recounted directly the package, the handwriting, the decision to give it to Rob, how Rob ended up in the hospital, how Rick tested the bottle. I kept my tone even, as Reynolds had advised. Stick to the facts. Let the evidence speak. Then Cardoso stood up. "Mrs. Rivera," she began with a voice smooth as polished wood, "you claim you recognize my client's handwriting on the note." "I don't claim. I know. But you hadn't seen that handwriting in over 3 years." "Correct. Is it possible, then, that you are mistaken?" She leaned one hand on the railing. "Are you telling this court that a woman's life should be ruined because you think a note looks like your daughter's handwriting?" I felt the first heat rise to my chest. "I don't think." "I know." Cardoso walked away almost casually. "Interesting, because we have here," she lifted a paper, "a graphology analysis from a certified expert stating that the note could not have been written by Rachel Fuentes." Murmurs ran through the room. The judge banged the gavel. The prosecutor objected, questioning the validity of the report. The judge admitted it for the record, but my stomach sank. Cardoso smiled slightly. "And tell me, Mrs. Rivera, isn't it true that you and my client had a strained relationship for years? That you sold her grandmother's farm without consulting her?" The prosecutor objected again. "Irrelevant and inflammatory." "Sustained," said the judge. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. When I finished, I stepped down, legs heavier than before. Reynolds met me at the table. "They're trying to portray you as bitter and resentful," he said quietly. "It's all they have. Don't let it sway you." But I could feel it already swaying. Outside on the courthouse steps, Rob waited, leaning on his cane. "They're playing dirty," he commented. "Doesn't matter if it's true. They just need enough to confuse the jury." I nodded. "Now they have a handwriting report." Rob's mouth twisted. "Bought. Probably. I've seen it in business disputes. You can buy an opinion like you buy a tie." On the day of jury deliberation, the sky was gray and low, as if considering all our choices. I sat in the gallery with my hands crossed in my lap, staring at the back of Rachel's neck. Cardoso had done her job sowing doubt, suggesting I was a vindictive mother manufacturing accusations, but the prosecutor had been relentless with the evidence. The notebook with the initials MR next to lethal doses, The jars found exactly where Liara said they would be. The search history about white snakeroot and cardiac arrest in the elderly. When the jury returned, I took a deep breath. The foreman stood, looking not at Rachel, but at the judge. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant. In that half second before he finished, I realized I had been holding my breath since the day that bottle appeared on my porch. Guilty. That single word fell like the first drop of rain on a roof after months of drought. It didn't thunder, it didn't roar, it just settled quiet, but undeniable. And I knew there was no going back, not for Rachel, not for me. The courtroom didn't erupt in gasps like you see on TV. It simply breathed differently. And for the first time in 3 years, I breathed too. The judge thanked the jury, dismissed them, and began reading the sentence. 25 years in the state penitentiary, eligible for parole after 15. His voice was steady and methodical, but I felt the weight of every syllable pressing down. Rachel didn't flinch. She just sat there, hands cuffed in front of her, eyes fixed on a point above the judge's head. If I didn't know her better, I'd think she was bored. The bailiff moved to escort her out, but Rachel turned her head at the last moment. Our eyes met, and in that instant, there was no court, no jury, no uniformed officers. Just the girl I had taught to play baseball, looking at the woman she had tried to kill. Her lips barely moved. This isn't the last chapter. Then, she was gone. I thought relief would come, but it didn't. What came was a hollow ache. Justice had been done on paper, but nothing on paper could glue together the pieces of what had shattered between us. Rob put a hand on my shoulder as we walked out. You did what you had to do, Martha. Don't let anyone tell you different. I nodded, but I didn't answer, because there was a part of me still wondering if I had lost more than I had won. Weeks later, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The trees had lost their leaves, and the first touch of winter was in the air. The chair didn't creak anymore. I had finally fixed it. I thought about the bottle, the poison, the trial, and the long road that brought me here. People think revenge ends when the gavel falls, when the guilty are taken away. But the truth is, revenge is just the surface. Beneath it are the years you can't get back, the conversations you'll never have, the family meals that turn into empty chairs and cold plates. Justice gave me safety. It didn't give me peace. But as the wind shifted, bringing the smell of wood smoke from somewhere down the road, I realized something. Peace isn't granted. It is built one quiet afternoon at a time, one decision not to look back at a closed door. I raised my cup to the empty yard. 2 endings, I said aloud. And to what comes next. Now, if you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe and click on this next video appearing on the screen, because in it, the story has a betrayal and a twist like you've never seen before. Yeah,